In April of 2016, U.S. Army's Task Force Strike, which was composed of the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, arrived in Iraq. Their mission was to advise and assist the Iraqi military in an operation to retake the city of Mosul, which had been under the control of the Islamic State, who had seized it in 2014 during the violent Battle of Mosul. In the months leading up to the push into eastern Mosul, later that October, the Army's task force would be assisted by the U.S. Air Force to deliver precision strikes, as well as to provide intel to our Iraqi allies. Part of those efforts involved the use of a secretive spy aircraft to perform reconnaissance over the region. Though it has never been officially confirmed by intelligence officials, the spy plane was likely the Lockheed U-2 Dragon Lady. First developed by the Skunk Works division in the 1950s with covert funding from the CIA, the high-altitude plane has been one of the agency's most reliable spying tools for decades. It is able to fly undetected over remote regions and film down to the street level. It was on one of these reconnaissance flights that it filmed something that is still unexplained. It has become known as the Mosul Orb. The video of the silver, orb-like object flying over the city of Mosul wouldn't be released to the public by the Pentagon for another 6 years, when it was unveiled at a meeting of the Senate Armed Services Subcommittee on Emerging Threats and Capabilities.
We're talking about a classified briefing likely taking place inside one of the secure rooms here at the Capitol. It's going to be members of the House Oversight Committee meeting with this group from the Pentagon that investigates reports of unidentified anomalous phenomena.
The Pentagon's All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, known as ARROW, which investigates reports of unidentified anomalous phenomenon, issued a statement saying that it demonstrated UAP characteristics and behavior consistent with other metallic orb observations in the region. In other words, this wasn't the first time they'd encountered strange floating orbs in a war zone, and it wouldn't be the last. The Mosul encounter didn't surprise Pentagon officials. ARROW was already familiar with strange orb-like objects. In fact, more than half of the sightings they investigated involved spherical UAP, according to leaked whistleblower documents. Clips of similar objects have also circulated online for years.
Videos recorded by U.S. Navy personnel have added a new layer of evidence to the current national debate about UFOs.
For 2 long hours on the night of July 15, 2019, the crew of the USS Omaha detected on multiple sensor systems unknown objects that surrounded the ship as it moved through ocean waters west of San Diego. One of the objects, a self-illuminated sphere at least 6 feet in diameter, flew alongside the Omaha for an extended period and was observed through a thermal sensor in the ship's combat center.
Though ARROW has said that many of the reported sightings they investigated could be attributed to common objects like balloons or consumer drones, hundreds still remain unexplained.
I think that what the American people need to know is that the U.S. military and intelligence community are sitting on a huge amount of visual and other information, still photos, video photos, other sensor information, and they have for a very long time. And it's not those fuzzy photos and videos that we've been given. There's very clear, high resolution.
How many visuals, graphics, videos, photos?
I mean, I've been told hundreds, maybe thousands.
That's journalist Michael Schellenberger testifying at the House Oversight and Accountability Subcommittee on Cybersecurity, Information Technology, and Government Innovations, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena, Exposing the Truth hearing. He claims that a Pentagon whistleblower gave him documents that reveal a secret program called Immaculate Constellation, which involved a database of encounters with UAP from the military. Orbs were also a common feature.
The report describes various incidents found in the human intelligence databases. One involved orbs surrounding and forcing an F-22 out of its patrol area. In another incident, the crew of a Navy aircraft carrier watched a small orange-red sphere rapidly descend from a high altitude of 100 to 200 yards directly above the flight deck of the CVN, or aircraft carrier.
There's also eyewitness accounts from service members.
As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena.
As UAP researcher Richard Dolan explains, military encounters with orbs date back decades. Though early encounters with the so-called Foo Fighters in World War II saw pilots dodging balls of light during dogfights, several decades later, there seems to be a resurgence in military encounters.
There was an explosion of encounters during the 1970s. Why the 1970s? And this is pre-internet. So the fact that I have more USO cases from the 70s than any other decade, including the 2010s comes in second.
Dolan has spent years tracking down reports of sightings and encounters and documenting what individuals have seen.
There are many, many cases, military encounters again, where these objects seem to come in, hang out, sometimes cause electromagnetic interference as well, but then they take off. It's like they're coming in, quick visit, and they're gone. This has happened in many aviation encounters, and it's happened to our aircraft carriers on a number of occasions. Objects would come in, glowing orange sphere hanging out over the USS John F. Kennedy aircraft carrier in 1971 for 20 minutes while all communications and weapon systems go offline. It was July 2nd, 1971. And we have a name, a man named James Kopp, who was a communications specialist aboard the USS JFK at that time, and talked in great detail about this. There's no reason not to believe his account, in my view. And to the extent that you can check out what he says, things do check out, they corroborate. So this orange, spherical, whatever, did it come from below the water? Did it come from above? I don't know. All he knows is he's working communications. They start spewing out gibberish. And he hears on the intercom someone screaming, "It's God, it's the end of the world." And he's like, what is it? He goes out to look. He says, it's nighttime and there is this thing. It glowed and it was like these bubbling colors like the sun. It gave off half the amount of light of daylight, he said. And it was just there. The ship went to battle stations, general quarters, after 30 seconds, and he had to go back to his communication station. But he said for the next 20 minutes, everything was offline.
As former Jane's Defense Weekly editor and author Nick Cook explains, spheres of light were frequently observed during air battles.
And whilst there were many descriptions of what a Foo Fighter was, they seemed to boil down to orbs or balls of light spanning a meter to several meters across. If you want to get down to the meter diameter for one of these things, there is no technology today that could come up with an explanation for an orb that is propellantless, it is anti-gravitic, it floats, it doesn't have any aerial surfaces.
The orb's shape may remain somewhat consistent, but their surface appearance can vary.
Yeah, orbs come up a lot in the conversations that I've had with various people from various backgrounds.
That's the Disclosure Project founder, Vinnie Adams. He spent years interviewing investigators, whistleblowers, military insiders, and witnesses to learn more about the phenomenon. Orbs are a common topic of his conversations.
And these orbs, they don't always necessarily take on the same appearance. We do have orbs that form more of like a light or a plasma effect that can blink in and out of our reality, let's say. And then we also get these kind of metallic orbs that look like they are just structured. And then we get things in between where they can actually morph from one to the other. And, you know, these are quite small. So, you know, it leads people to kind of hypothesize that they may be some kind of drone or scout that could be sent out to observe. I mean, we certainly, as humanity and humans, we send out scouts and drones and things that to look into certain things, whether in war zones or even out into space. We send these, unmanned objects, let's say. So, you know, that's a really good theory.
Even though there are variations in how these orbs appear, one common feature is their unexplainable movements. They seem to float.
The first object was a metallic basketball-sized sphere, and it was above a podium, and looked like it was just levitating above the podium.
Levitating above the podium.
Mm-hmm.
So there was space between the sphere and the podium itself.
Correct.
Early this year, a former Green Beret named Randy Anderson said he was working at a secretive underground facility at the Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane, in Indiana. Randy has come forward to well-known podcasters in the UAP area, like Jesse Michaels, claiming that in 2014, he was shown extremely advanced orb technology at an underground black site, which he says was called the Off-World Technology Division.
We moved on down another hallway and got into an area that had a marking on the wall and said off-world technology.
It said off-world technology.
Yeah.
Whether or not he's telling the truth may not be possible to confirm. But assuming he is, why would officials at the underground facility name the area the Off-World Technology Division? Why would they let Randy and others see it? Whether or not it was real, or a psyop to plant disinformation about real highly advanced technology, or actual off-world craft, is not verifiable. But what is the propulsionless nature of the orbs often witnessed by military aviators that seem to be able to levitate, like the sphere Randy Anderson claims to have been shown.
Yeah, it's really strange how there doesn't seem to be any kind of obvious form of propulsion. And I guess, we've heard many theories over the years about how these things maneuver and what energy, how they get their energy. And, are they fully anti-gravity, or there's some kind of a electromagnetic effect that's allowing them to manipulate space and time. And so to the point where, they wouldn't, even at high velocities, they wouldn't make any sonic boom because they're not actually flying with any sort of friction against our air in our atmosphere, that we could see them physically and they look like they're here, but they could just be outside of what we understand. I think that, there's been a lot of conversations around that, but also a multitude of theories on the actual propulsion systems, but it's certainly something that's so exotic that it doesn't seem like anything that our current levels of physics can understand or even replicate.
Sphere encounters even became a common occurrence off the coast of Virginia Beach, where they showed up in the flight path of F-18s. Here's former flight pilot Randy Graves again, testifying before lawmakers in 2023.
In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers. And I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, two F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
The object that Grave and others encountered were described as clear spheres that had gray cubes inside. The pilots determined that they couldn't be balloons. They were often motionless, even in hurricane-force winds. Though, as Grave notes, there was a stigma attached to discussing the encounters. The Navy would go on to officially acknowledge 11 incidents that were such close misses that they required pilots to take evasive action.
Nothing that we have in our inventory whatsoever around the world that we know of, first of all, right? Doesn't mean that American or any other tech is not out there, but if it's a foreign adversary, that's pretty wild and we better be scared. I'd rather it be a UFO, let's be honest.
That's Chrissy Newton. She's the host of the podcast Rebelliously Curious and a reporter with the outlet The Debrief. The site has been critical to recent disclosure efforts and was where former United States Air Force officer and intelligence official David Grush made admissions about the government UAP programs he worked on. As Newton notes, some of these sphere-like craft seem to somehow know where military aircraft are going to be.
understanding how the heck they can stay up there for so long and also know where they are, right? Like knowing where a ship might be, and it's only maybe intelligence that know, or a group of people. So I think that's really wild. We see a lot of that, the knowing when nobody else should know, and how would they know when it's a secret? That's petrifying. And I think those are the most common things we see outside of maybe shapes and speed, right?
Newton's points are backed up by Graves' own testimony.
Mr. Graves, again, I'd like to know, how do you know that these were not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
Okay, have you spoken to commercial and military pilots that have seen these off of our East Coast?
I have.
Ladies and gentlemen, hot salt from Firecracker Farm is the real deal. It's not just heat, it's flavor that elevates everything that you cook. The best thing to happen to food since fire. That's a bold statement, but I'm gonna go ahead and agree with that. It's delightful. One of the best things about this brand is there's a real person behind it. His name is Alex, and he makes these in small batches, so it's not always easy to get. You don't wanna miss out. All of the flavors are great. I have tried all of them. You really can't go wrong. Seriously, try it on everything. Steaks, vegetables, everything in between. I love cooking. I like cooking at home. I don't like putting sauces and overbearing things on the things that I cook, so I tried a little bit of the salt. And if I'm being honest, I tried a little bit too much the first time. It was a little spicy. So I had to back it off a little bit, and it made everything that I cook at home taste better. So it's an easy addition to the things that I already make. It tasted amazing. I was using the product for well over 6 months before Alex reached out to present as the sponsor for Change Agents. Easy peasy. I was already doing it, no additional time, a touch point with it in my personal life. I can talk about it from personal experience. Love what the brand stands for. Love what the brand was founded around. Enjoy the person who founded the brand. I mean, this is a match made in heaven. Get out of the comfort zone of what you can get in the grocery store. Go online to Firecracker Farm and use the code IRONCLAD for 15% off of your first order. You're going to be shocked at how much more of a flavor it brings out in what you cook. Newton is one of the leading voices pushing for disclosure and regularly interviews some of the most important names working behind the scenes on the issue. Though she's now viewed as one of the field's leading journalists, Newton's introduction to the topic was more personal than professional.
My dad had a UFO experience when I believe he was 18 with a group of people up in Northern Ontario in Pembroke, and he took a picture of a UFO, and when I was a little girl, he showed me that photo.
The object exhibited many of the same characteristics as the orb and spheres observed by the pilots.
So it had the sun, but you could see the perspective of it, which is really, really cool. You saw the road, and then you saw tail lights, but then over top of a telephone post is where the UFO was. Now, here's the thing. It possibly could have been a drone because it was like later 70s, 80s. Drones were being tested then by the American government, but my dad flashed its high beams at it and it flashed back at my dad. So it was the size of he said little kids could fit in it, which is interesting because Bob Lazar says that when he went into his craft, or the craft that he saw that they were reverse engineering, it was like small enough for little kids. And then what ended up happening is they had a rifle in the back, they were hunting. And when he took the gun out and he pointed it at the UFO, or one of the guys did, to get a better look at it, not to shoot it, but to look at it through the scope, it took off. Now, the wild thing is that my dad called me, 3 weeks ago. He was like, have you seen the new George Knapp documentary that's on Netflix? And I was like, I haven't watched it. I said, I haven't had time. I said, but I know about it and I've been hearing about it. And he's like, one of the men has the exact same sighting that I saw that was like a cattle rancher. And the same thing they did was put the gun up to the UFO and watched it take off.
Newton's father's experience was with an orb that seemed to demonstrate some sort of intelligence. But one of the most famous incidents involving a close encounter with a military fighter jet didn't involve a sphere. It did, however, seem to demonstrate some intelligence. The encounter was with a shape described like a tic-tac. In recent years, the Navy has declassified several videos captured by fighter pilots, including this one from 2015, filmed off the West Coast. The video appears to show an object with an oblong shape like a tic-tac, flying at unexplainable speeds. In another incident with a similar object in 2004, the object appears to rotate and has no propulsion system.
A whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like another thing, it's rotating.
At one of the congressional hearings, pilot David Favor was asked directly about the tic-tac incident.
Mr. Favor, what astonished you the most about the flight capabilities of these tic-tac, very briefly?
The performance. Absolute performance. It was.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
But perhaps the oddest thing about Favor's encounter wasn't how the object moved, but where it moved.
As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also.
After that, with the encounter seemingly over, Favor was instructed to go to his predetermined cap point 60 miles away. That's when something odd happened.
We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as you started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute."
And though the recent release by the Navy only dates back to encounters in the early 2004s, similar sightings with hypersonic tic-tacs have been documented for decades.
And if you look at the tic-tac, for example, that shape has been reported before. What you'll find is that obviously it wasn't called a tic-tac. You may have things like butane tanks and things that people were associating with that shape at the time, let's say if it was the 50s or something like that.
That's Vinny Adams again. As he notes, pilots reporting encounters with what they called flying butane tanks date back to the 1950s, long before the white oblong candy entered cultural awareness. Some of those vessels have also been seen going underwater and re-emerging with barely any disturbance to the surface of the water. These have become known as USO, or unidentified submerged objects, and some have been encountered deep in the ocean.
So in terms of actual USO water-based reports, they're relatively rare, but they're not so rare that they never happen. We are landlubbers. We're not usually out in the middle of the ocean, and then if you are, like if you're in U.S. Navy and you're out in the middle of the Pacific or the Atlantic, yes, you may have an encounter, but then are you going to be easily able to talk about it? Frequently, when you look at the Navy reports, they're often written by Navy guys who've retired, and they're like either anonymous, frequently anonymous. They may sometimes give their name, but they will almost inevitably say, this is what happened to me 20-something years ago when I was aboard this ship in this body of water, and I feel that I can now discuss it.
But part of the reason for the relatively low numbers of encounters at sea is simply a matter of access. USOs could be much more common than anyone realizes.
There's actually a certain amount of logic for a visitor that comes from elsewhere to want to set up shop under the ocean. It's more of a stable environment in many ways. You've got less temperature fluctuation down there. You've got less pressure fluctuations.
In addition to the traditional flying saucers dating back to World War II, spheres observed by both military personnel and civilians, and oblong objects capable of effortlessly traveling between air and water. There is one or more shape that could provide a clue to the mystery of UAPs and their possible origins, whether from another planet or a military special access program. the Black Triangle.
1997, thousands reported seeing a V-shaped light formation in the sky. The Phoenix Lights have since sparked a lot of debate. Was it aliens, or is it just earthly explanation? Still up in the air.
Yeah, there seem to have been a lot of waves of Black Triangle sightings, especially sort of in the sort of late 70s, 80s, and the 90s, and globally as well. These triangles have been ranging from quite small. If you look at the 1980 Bentwaters case, Rendlesham Forest, a small triangle was seen there. But then if you look at things like the Belgian wave in the late 80s, you've got very, very large triangles, even through to these boomerang triangles at the Phoenix Lights in 97. I think a lot of what was seen back in that era was potentially, our technology being tested.
There's good reason for Adams to suggest that the Black Triangle could be evidence of covert black projects, especially when considering that intriguing quote, UFO patents by Dr. Salvatore Paez, an aerospace engineer at the Naval Air Warfare Center Aircraft Division. Along with a space-time modification weapon and a high-energy electromagnetic field generator, the patents, spanning hundreds of pages and featuring dozens of detailed technical sketches, depict what seems to be a triangular craft. These designs include mass reduction devices that could theoretically manipulate gravity, enabling the craft to perform in ways that defy conventional understanding of physics. Ways that would seem to confirm testimonies of individuals who say they've encountered Black Triangle craft. While the patents, which outline how a Black Triangle craft could operate, may seem like science fiction, Dr. James Sheehy, Chief Technology Officer of the U.S. Naval Aviation Enterprise, doesn't just find them plausible, he has affirmed that he believes that they are indeed, quote, operable. His comments led credence to the idea that the patents could be a way for the Navy to hide their most groundbreaking innovations in plain sight. Would an adversary honestly believe that advanced weaponry technology would be as easy to find as a Google search? Newton says patents for exotic technologies are more common than you would think, including technologies that would enable a warp drive.
Christopher Plain from our team, who is an amazing journalist, and he has covered warp drive technology like no one else has recently. The Akubarari theory that talks about potentially of like warp drive, before that, there were, I believe, independently within NASA and then outside of NASA, there were patents created by this by multiple groups of people. I know specifically one, but from what I know, that patent was, created, and Sonny Harold White worked at NASA on warp drive technology, and then he left and then started his own private practice around, called Limitless Space, that's looking into it and still is, and is talking about propulsion and all different types of propulsion means.
The theoretical technology could power a craft like the Aurora, a long-rumored project from Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works program that had the appearance of a large black triangle. According to Lou Elizondo, the former senior leader of the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, there could be a reason why the government remains less than transparent about what they know about these orbs and other craft.
Cold War was really cranking up. We wanted to look at Russia to see what their ICBM and missile development looked like. So there was a treaty said we couldn't fly over mainland Russia. And so what did we do? Lockheed Skunk Works with the CIA built the U-2 aircraft. And the U-2 aircraft was a plane that was going to fly so high and so fast that the Russians would not even be able to see it, let alone shoot it down. And so what happened the first few times we flew it? We succeeded. The Russians didn't react. So clearly the plane did exactly what it was intended to do. It wasn't until the Russians developed the SA-2 surface-to-air missile and successfully shot it down and paraded the powers, the pilot, in front of the United Nations and the wreckage of the aircraft, did the Russians admit they'd been tracking every single flight. They didn't even admit to their own people that they had a problem until they had a solution for that problem, right? Why admit there's a problem to something until you have a solution for that problem? And the U-2 is a perfect example of that. The Russian denied to their people that the U.S. had no capability until they were able to shoot it down and neutralize it. And this could be the very same thing here from a national security perspective. Maybe you've got things going on that we're not comfortable yet admitting there's a problem that we don't have a solution for. Look at the drones. Look how people are reacting right now to what could potentially be conventional drones, and we can't even stop that. Can you imagine how people would go literally apoplectic if they found out that there is some sort of life form out there or some sort of technology out there that's not ours, that's able to do whatever it wants? That does not create that warm, fuzzy feeling in most people's hearts. And I can understand from that perspective, from a national security perspective, why maybe you don't want to tell everybody everything.
So how do we determine what these strange objects are and if they originate from our planet? You have to go to the source, military special access programs, and the contractors responsible for building some of the world's most advanced technologies, including Skunk Works' most notorious secret project. That will be next time on Black Project.